All right, this is lecture 3. We're going to start logic right now, today. And today the sort of topic of the day is terms, but I want to introduce the next 4 days of class. You go to the syllabus. Today we're going to be talking about terms, next class propositions, and then the 2 classes after that, different syllogisms. I'm going to talk about what those are right now. And then the class after that, fallacies. All that section is going to be just on logic. This is kind of, we're just doing like a speed run through a basic classical logic course in the next, whatever that was, 5 weeks. But I want to just introduce the topic itself. Logic is about taking ideas, connecting them together in a way that is true, and connecting those connections to make further conclusions that are valid, that are, correct. And I'm going to give you, so the terms that we're going to be using for this. An idea in the mind, a simple idea, which we're going to go through various types of ideas, today. We're going to spend a lot of time with that, is represented by a term. So the word term is not the same as the word word. It's not even the same as the word noun. A term is a sound we make. It's a word that refers to one clear idea. We're going to talk about what that means in a bit, but I just want you to take that for a second. So there's one clear idea that we have. Let's say let's say we have a clear idea of what a mammal is. So it's a universal idea. We talked about more kind of abstract substantives last class in grammar. So let's take the idea of a mammal, and let's take the idea of a human being. Those are 2 ideas. That's what's called the first act of the intellect, is the ability to make simple concepts like that. So the first thing that the mind does, called the first act of the intellect, there's 3 of them. The first act of the intellect, what's called simple abstraction, is where we look around at the world, we make observations. Sometimes we do this scientifically, sometimes we do it in a more philosophical way. We look around and we make observations of certain classes of things, certain kinds of things, and we group them together into a universal concept. And so we can have a concept of mammals or animals or human beings, or what green is, something like that. We can just have a simple concept like that. That is the result of simple abstraction. First act of the intellect. That's not all the mind does, though. The second thing that the mind does is called judgment. And a judgment, an act of judgment, is when we say, this concept is that. So we say, for example, all humans are mammals. What are we doing there? We're taking 2 concepts. We're taking human and mammal, and we're joining them together. That act of joining 2 concepts together to make what's called a proposition, which we're going to talk about next week, that act is called the act of judgment. And so we're judging, it is true to say, all mammals are animals. Okay. Similarly, another proposition would be to say, no mammals are reptiles. So what we're doing there is we're taking 2 concepts. We're taking the concept mammal and we're taking the concept reptile, and we're separating them. We're saying this one is not that one. Those are different ways to make a proposition. And so a term is going to be a symbol of a basic concept. So there's the basic concept of mammal. The word mammal, the term mammal, is what we're going to call a term. That's what we're going to talk about right now. Next class is when you take 2 terms and join them by saying this is that. We join them with the word is, and that's going to be a proposition. A proposition is all mammals are animals. That's an example of a proposition. That's going to be next week. After that, you can take 2 propositions and make a conclusion based on them. And when you have 2 propositions, all mammals are animals, all human beings are mammals, therefore all human beings are animals, that entire process is the result of the third act of the intellect called reasoning. And that's called, when you take those two premises, those two propositions, and you make a conclusion, that whole thing is called a syllogism. And we're going to spend one full week talking about the categorical syllogism, which is what I just described. And then there's other types of syllogisms called hypothetical syllogisms. But again, three acts of the intellect. Simple apprehension, where we apprehend the world and we come up with simple concepts. That's the one. Judgment, where we take two concepts and join them into a proposition. That's judgment. And the third act of the intellect is reasoning, where we take two propositions and we make a conclusion based on them. All three of those acts of the intellect can be done well or they can be done badly. And we study logic so that we make sure we're doing it well. And so that we make sure we don't fall for people reasoning badly and having them convince us of false things. The last day we're going to talk about logic, class number 7, is going to be on fallacies. Fallacies are bad ways to reason. And we study bad ways to reason, again, so that we don't commit those bad ways to reason, and so that we don't get taken advantage of by those bad ways of reasoning. Okay? So that's going to be it's kind of an outline of what we're going to do for the next few weeks regarding logic. I don't know what else I want to say about that. Yeah, I guess whatever else I'll say, we'll say as we go through it. So the questions today are, what is a term? Well, I'm not going to read all of them. Let's just start with the first one. So number 1, what is a term? I already kind of talked about this, but let's go to page 71 of Sister Miriam Joseph's book. A term is a concept communicated through a symbol. Page 71, second sentence. A term is a concept communicated through a symbol. A concept communicated through a symbol. However, a term is not the same thing as a concept. Go down a paragraph. A term differs from a concept only in this. A term is an idea in transit, hence is dynamic and ens communicationis. A thing communicating? I think that's what it means. The concept is an idea representing reality and ens mentis, a thing in the mind. So a thing in communication versus a thing in the mind. A concept is a potential term. It becomes an actual term when it's communicated through a symbol. Hence, a term is the meaning, the form, the logical context of words. So what's my question? What is the difference between a term and a concept? A concept is in the mind. A term is in our communication. How do we communicate? We can do it verbally. We make noise. We can do it through sign language. We can do it through writing, and so on. Maybe there's even other ways. Okay, so that's a term is a concept communicated, and we communicate through these symbols, which we call sounds or written words, or sometimes pictures or whatever. Okay, so that's what a term versus a concept is. What is the difference between an empirical term and a general term? Go to page 73. Empirical and general terms. An empirical term, this is the second paragraph of that section. An empirical term designates an individual or an aggregate of individuals. It must be symbolized by either a proper name or an empirical description. For example, Christopher Columbus, the desk in this room. Okay, so an empirical term is a proper noun, more or less, or something like this desk. That's an empirical term. What does it mean? It's a term that refers to something that you can point to. A general term, also called a universal term, signifies essence of either a species or a genus. It must be symbolized by a common name or general description. For example, tree, three-sided rectilinear plane figure. Most of the terms that we use that we're going to use as examples in logic are going to be general terms or universal terms. An empirical term is Father Andy. A general term is human being. A empirical term would be that dog. A general term would be dog or dogs or dogness or something like that. So that's general, or I'm probably going to call it universal. More often I'm used to using that term. So that's the difference between an empirical and a general term. By the way, as I go through this, we're just going to distinguish various ways to understand what a term is. That's all we're doing right now. Nothing really special going on. And in fact, I'm going to kind of warn you, today and next class are going to seem a little bit pointless. You're not going to quite understand why are we doing all this? What's the point of all this? It's going to be useful. It's going to be interesting. Like, okay, I never really reflected on how terms can be used in different ways or what different types of terms are. It's going to be interesting, but there's actually going to be a use for a lot of what we're doing, but you're not going to find out, you're not going to really be able to see what that is until class number 5 on categorical syllogisms. So just be patient with the practical aspect of this. For now, just sort of reflect on how this might work, okay? What is the difference between a concrete versus abstract term? Go to page 74. A concrete term is one that represents realities as they actually are in the order of being. Examples are animal, fast, smooth, long, near, and warm. An abstract term is one that represents either substance or accident, mentally abstracted from concrete reality and regarded, for the sake of emphasis, as an object of thought. I'm not sure this is a very important distinction for what we're going to be doing in this class, but just think about it this way. It's one thing to say animal. It's another thing to say animality. It's one thing to say human. It's another thing to say humanity. What's the difference between human and humanity? That's the difference between a concrete term and an abstract term. A concrete term, animal, I am an animal, I am a human. Am I humanity? No, I don't think I'm humanity. That would be kind of a weird thing to say about myself. So there is a difference. So I just want you to kind of reflect on that difference. But just sort of be able to match which one is concrete, which one is abstract. Absolute versus relative terms. Lower on page 74. An absolute term is one that can be understood by itself without reference to another term. Examples include man, tree, dog, field, red, hard. There's millions of them. A relative term is one of two terms, maybe even more than two sometimes, each of which must be understood with reference to the other. So an absolute term, if you know what the term is, that's all you need. A relative term requires something else to be understood. So for example, husband. Well, what's a husband? There's actually no way to understand what a husband is without understanding what a wife is. Parent and child. There's no way to even define what a parent is unless you also define child along with it. These are relative terms. Teacher and student, cause and effect, friend and friend. It's interesting. The word friend can't be defined except in reference to another friend. Larger and smaller, taller and shorter, so on and so on. So that's absolute versus relative terms. And then collective versus distributive terms. A collective use requires that the verb vocabulary and the pronouns be singular. For example, the audience shows its pleasure by demanding encore after encore. So a collective term is one that talks about an entire group as a group together. That's a collective term. The audience, okay? The people demand. I suppose America is a collective term. A distributive use of a term requires that the verb or copula, I'm halfway down page 75, and pronouns be plural because the members of the group are thought of as acting individually. So, for example, the audience expresses uproarious approval by tossing their hats into the air and shouting with loud voices. So they are doing it. So I guess you can say America is growing because our population is growing, right? That's kind of a singular collective use. Americans are, I don't know what you can say about Americans. Americans are tough people. I don't know, something like that. When you say Americans, when you're using it in the plural, you're talking about each one of them individually. Okay, now it might not be true that all Americans are tough people or something like that, but that's the type of use you're using. You're using a distributive use, distributive term. Okay, I guess that's it on number 1. Let's talk about different ways that things can be different. Let me ask this question. Let me get 2 things. Okay. This pen right here is a Pilot, I don't know if I can focus it, a Pilot G2, and it's a 0.07, I guess, millimeter. I think that refers to like how big the little ball is there or something like that. So that's this pen. This is the same kind of pen. The question I'm asking is, are these the same pen? Well, in a way they're the same. They're the same kind of pen. They're both black Pilot G207 pens. Are they one and the same pen? No, they're 2 different pens, but they're the same pen. You see how different and same can kind of be ambiguous. So we need to clarify what sameness and difference means. So on page 76, she does a nice job distinguishing these different kinds of different. Terms, or even things, are categorically different if they are in different categories. So if you go back to the 10 categories, substance, quantity, quality, relation, action, passion, and so on and so on. They're categorically different if they are in different categories. So apple, is apple different than large? Yeah. Is apple different than red? Yeah, they're totally different, even categories of thing. That's the most different you can be. Terms are generically different if they belong to different genera within the same category. So for example, you take one of the categories. So the one she's using, I don't know what category she thinks she's using here. Let's say, what would be things that are generically different? They're different genus. So she's using round, smooth, and sour. Oh, I get what she's doing. Okay, these are qualities. That's what she wanted us to figure this out. So round, smooth, and sour are qualities, but they're different types of quality. Round is, is a shape. Smooth is kind of a touch thing. Sour is a taste thing. And look at the next, after the semicolon. Stone, tree, and animal. Those are substances. So they're in the same category of substance, but they're different types of thing. A stone is one kind of thing, is a genus of thing. A tree is a different kind of thing than a stone. An animal is a different kind of thing, a different genus, even broadly speaking. Terms are specifically different if they belong to different species within the same genus. Examples include white, red, blue, yellow, gray. So what is the difference? Are white, red, blue, yellow, and gray, and black the same? Yeah, they're the same species. They're the same genus, but they're specifically different colors. So they're specifically different. Are all living things kind of the same? Are all animals the same? Yeah, they're the same genus. They're the same in their animality, but they're different species. Are human beings different than dogs and cats? Yeah. However, are human beings all the same? Yeah, they're the same species. So they're specifically the same. All human beings are specifically the same species, specific and species. Are all animals generically the same? Yeah, all animals are generically the same. We're the same genus, but we're specifically different than than dogs and cats. How are you and I different? Terms are individually different if they designate individuals within the same species. For every individual is unique, is itself and not another. Examples include this woman, that woman, my mother, the Hudson woman, the Hudson River, the Mississippi River, the Snake River. I don't know if I would call a river a substance, but or even an individual. But how are you and I different? We're different individually. We're the same specifically. We're also the same generically. We're also the same categorically. Okay? So some things, so now let's go back to the pens. These pens, they're certainly in the same category. They're both, I mean, I guess I would call them substances very, very loosely speaking. They're really aggregates, but whatever. So we'll call them a substance. They're not accidents for sure. So they're categorically the same. They're generically the same. They're in the same genus, of writing implement, I guess. I don't know. They're the same species. They're the same specific kind of pen. They're both Pilot G207s. How are they different? They're different only individually. Okay? So those are the different types of difference. Again, worth reflecting on. Now, how can things be opposite? Go to number 4. What are the different ways things can be opposite? Or she uses the word repugnant. I don't know why she used the word repugnant, but opposite, I think, is a better way to term it. Or maybe contrary. According to the nature of the difference, the terms are either repugnant or not. Terms are repugnant when they are incompatible, that is, when they signify realities that are mutually exclusive, that cannot coexist in the same substance at the same time and in the same period. What's my question? Sorry. The different ways things can be opposite. Terms that are categorically different or generically different are not necessarily repugnant, for they often signify realities that can coexist in the same substance. The following terms are necessarily repugnant. All terms that are individually different are repugnant. An individual cannot be itself and another at the same time. So what's the opposite of me? Everybody who's not me. What's the opposite of, I don't know, Sylvester Stallone? It's weird to say what's the opposite. Usually opposites are kind of like, there's like a wheel and there's like something on the other side of the wheel. But there's other ways you can think of opposition or repugnance. What's the opposite of Sylvester Stallone? Not Sylvester Stallone. So all individuals are opposites of each other. All terms that are specifically different are repugnant. For example, elm, oak, maple, dog, horse, square, circle, triangle. So what's the opposite of an elm? An oak tree and a maple tree and every other kind of tree is the opposite of an elm. So species have kind of repugnance as well. They can be contraries or opposites. Most importantly, contradictory terms are necessarily repugnant. This is the most important one for what we're going to be doing next. White and non-white. So let's talk about colors for a second. What's the opposite of blue? Well, according to what I'm saying, all the other colors are the opposite of blue, are contraries of blue. Red is not blue. According to the way she's defining repugnance, red is repugnant to blue. Something that's red is not blue. Or at least like that part of it that's red is also not also blue at the same time. But red and blue, there's all kinds of other colors. What we want when we're making definitions, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, what we want when we're making definitions is not just red and blue. We don't want just contraries. We want what's called contradictories. So what we want is blue, not blue versus red. We want blue versus non-blue. Why is that better? It's better to have blue versus non-blue because that doesn't leave anything out. Within that genus of color, blue and not blue covers all the colors, believe it or not. Because not blue is every other color besides blue, and blue is blue, so we're covering all of our bases. When we're doing definitions, when we're determining what kind of thing a thing is, what we want is contradictory opposition. We want blue and not blue. We want words like that. For example, when we're determining what a human being is, one of the ways we can determine a kind of substance is to say that they're mortal. And what's the contradictory of mortal? Immortal. So there's mortal and non-mortal, or not mortal, or immortal. And those are that we're covering all our bases. You got to be one or the other. Okay, so that's going to be something that's preferable. So those are the different ways things can be opposite or repugnant. They can be contrary, or they can be contradictory. Contrary means blue and red. Contradictory is blue and not blue, or non-blue. Okay. What is the difference between extension and intension? This is very annoying in philosophy. We do this just to be annoying as philosophers. Look at the word intention. When I say I intend to do something, what's your intention? What are your intentions with my daughter, young man? It's spelled INTENTION, intention. This is not that. This is intention with an S. So it's not exactly the same as intention with a T. So the extension and intension of terms. What is the extension of a term? Bottom of page 77. The extension of a term is its designation, the total set of objects to which the term can be applied. So when I say human being, what is the extension of the term human being? You're learning a new word now. What is the extension of the term human being? To how many objects does that term human being extend? And as of right now, I don't know, 8 billion human beings are alive in the world right now. I'm not going to get theological and ask whether the people in heaven count as human beings, or just whatever. People alive today, the term human being, the extension of that term is something like 8 billion, whatever it is. That's the extension. Is the set of beings that term applies to. Next page. The intension of a term is its meaning, the sum of the essential characteristics that the term implies. So what is the intention of a term? The intention of a term is its definition, the meaning or definition of a term. So the intention of the term human being is whatever a human being is, and I'm going to give you a classical definition of human being. The classical definition of human being is rational animal. So what's the intention of human being? Rational animal. What's the extension of human being? 8 billion people. That's extension versus intention. Who cares? Why are we talking about this? Here's something interesting to note. She makes this note somewhere here. The relation between extension and intension, middle of page 78. As a term increases in intension, it decreases in extension. As a term increases in extension, it decreases in intention. Let's do that. Human being. What's the intention of human being? Rational animal. How many? What's the extension? 8 billion. Let's increase the intention. What does it mean to increase the intention? We're going to add to the definition. We'll be more precise. Not just human being. We're going to say blonde human being. You see what I did? I added to the intention of what I'm talking about. So I'm adding to the definition blonde human being. So now my definition is bigger. What happened when I added to my intention? What happened to my extension? How many blonde human beings are there? Way less than 8 billion. I don't even know if I could guess. Maybe 1 billion, maybe 2 billion, something like that. It's a lot less than 8 billion. So as you increase, now if I were to say male blonde human being, now I've made the intention even bigger. Male blonde rational animal. Way less than just saying blonde rational animal. You see that? So my extension is smaller as the bigger my definition gets, the smaller number of things that it applies to. So the bigger my intention, the smaller my extension. Similarly, let me make my intention smaller. Instead of saying rational animal, how many rational animals are there? 8 billion or so. Let me get rid of rational. So now my intention is smaller. I'm just going to say animal. How many animals are there? way more than 8 billion. I have no idea how to even guess that. It's, I don't know, billions and billions and billions on Earth right now. So when you make the intention smaller, the extension gets bigger. Okay, I hope that's clear. What is the Tree of Porphyry? That's the second part of number 4. Tree of Porphyry is right there on page 79. Porphyry was a commentator he was a Neoplatonist philosopher, and he lived in the 300s and 400s. I think the beginning of the 400s he was still alive. Right? I might be totally wrong. Let me look this up. I don't want to give you bad facts. When did Porphyry live? Oh, he died in 305. Okay, I was a century off. Glad I looked that up. So Porphyry lived from 234 to 305. He was a Neoplatonic philosopher. And I think he was a student of Plotinus, who was a very famous philosopher as well. Anyway, the thing he's most famous for better or worse, is this thing called the Tree of Porphyry that you see on the top of 79, where he's attempting to categorize all beings. And he does it with this tree. I don't know how, it doesn't exactly look like a tree, but it kind of branches. That's the idea. That you start from the very top, and it's substance, all substance. Okay? That's the most generic, like not even generic, it's the most universal thing you can say. Substance is divided into, on the left, material, and then on the right, immaterial. The line is drawn toward the left. So all substances are either material or immaterial. What's he doing there? He's making a contradictory opposition. So material and immaterial leaves nothing out. They're contradictories. Now, why is he doing this in general? Sorry, let me talk to you about why Porphyry made this tree. This is about definitions. If you want to define something, what is it to define something? What is it? I want to define a human being. Okay? By the way, you can never define an individual. There's no definition of you. There's no definition of Father Andy. There's too much knowable about me to give a definition. You can only define species and genus. And genus doesn't mean biological genus. It means you can define specific category, I don't want to say category because that means something else. You can define a species and you can define a genus. Broad collections and sort of tighter collections. You can't define individuals. I'm going to let you think about that yourself. You can never define an individual. There's always more to an individual than whatever their definition is. One of the reasons why do not judge lest you be judged. Okay. But when you define a kind of thing, you want to do that. You want to know what you're talking about. If you say well, I'd like to talk about what love is. I want to give a speech on love. And if somebody says, well, can you give a definition of love? And you say no, then literally you don't know what you're talking about. If you can't define something, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know about that thing. So definitions are extremely important, and they're going to be really critical for everything that we're going to be doing for the rest of this class, and even for your own communication. And if you can't define a term, at least loosely or getting close, question whether you really know what you mean. Now, there are certain things that are hard to define. Maybe love is one of those things that are hard to define. I don't know. Maybe not. But you should at least be able to attempt a definition towards it. And a lot of philosophy, as you take some more philosophy classes, you're going to get annoyed at philosophers going back and forth trying to define a term. I'm teaching right now Plato's Republic. Plato has a book called The Republic. Basically, the whole book is an attempt to define the word justice. And it's several hundred pages long. So it's one thing that philosophers are good at being annoying at, is trying to define things. However, not everybody has to be as annoying as philosophers, but if you're going to talk about something, or if you're going to pretend you know it, you better be able to define it. So that's what Porphyry's tree is about. If you're going to define this kind of thing, what it means to define this kind of thing is to say, this is how it's different from every other kind of thing. So if I want to know what a human being is, that means I have to be able to distinguish it from every other kind of being. If I want to know what a square is, Well, how do I define what a square is? Well, I have to be able to say how it's different from a triangle and everything else in its class. That's what the Tree of Porphyry is about. Substance. There's material versus immaterial. Okay? Within material substance, there are... Actually, another word for a material substance. She didn't really say this clearly. Another word for material substance is a body. Bodies can be animate or inanimate. You see that on the left and the right. Again, we're leaving nothing out. Animate means alive. Inanimate means not alive. Okay? An animate body is called an organism. That's just what we're defining an organism as, a living body, which is what an organism means. Organisms can be sentient or non-sentient. So a non-sentient organism would be, I don't know, coral reef maybe, something like that. Maybe plants. Some plants can kind of sense the sun, like sunflowers. But most plants, I don't know if we would call them sentient. Okay? So a sentient organism, he's a porphyry named for a better word, you don't have to agree with everything here, but a sentient organism is called an animal. Animals can be rational or non-rational. Again, opposites, contradictories. And a rational animal is called a man. And this is a tool you can use to define every species of being. I said triangle, okay, let's define a triangle. Well, everything is some kind of substance. Is a triangle a material or immaterial substance? Think about that. You can have a triangular piece of wood, but that's not a triangle. I think a triangle is an immaterial substance. I'll let you think about that some more, but I think a triangle is an immaterial substance. Okay, it's an immaterial. Well, does that define it? No. There's all kinds of material. There's angels too, and there's squares. Well, that means I have a lot more definition to do. My definition has to apply only to triangles. Okay, so let's see. Immaterial, let me say, under immaterial, I can sort of subdivide immaterial as, I don't know, let's say living and non-living immaterial beings. So a living immaterial being would be like the angels and maybe the souls of the saints and God and stuff like that. Maybe non-living immaterial beings could be numbers and geometric figures. Okay, then I'm going to say discrete or continuous. Those are, you could argue that those are contradictories. Well, continuous would be maybe on a plane. So now we're into plane geometry versus three-dimensional. So now we're on a two-dimensional plane. Okay, so now I have a two-dimensional I have a two-dimensional Euclidean plane figure. I'm getting close, but now I still have squares and triangles and circles. How do I distinguish a triangle from a square and a circle? A three-sided, I have to define a side as a straight line, a three-sided geometrical figure on a Euclidean plane. That's one way that you could define a triangle. And you pick whatever else you want, and you would have to define it in that way. Okay. So as you're noticing, it's not so easy to define things. So this is what Porphyry's tree is meant to kind of aid with. All right? All that was number 4. Number 5, what are logical and distinctive definitions? And I'll talk some more about definitions. A logical definition, page 80. A logical definition, also called a real definition. I actually don't like that she calls it logical, but it's fine. A logical definition expresses the essence of a species in terms of its proximate genus and its specific differentia. I don't like that she gave you these terms without explaining them, so I'm going to explain them right now. First of all, a logical definition is the definition of the essence of a kind of thing, as opposed to, what was her opposite? Distinctive definition. Go to the next page. A distinctive definition is definition by property. The pattern is as follows. Species is genus plus property. Okay. What do you mean genus, property, and what is a specific differentia? Go to page 102. And this is kind of a flaw in this book. she uses these things called predicables without telling you what they are. The 5 predicables, does she even list them? The number of the predicables. Here it is. Sorry, it's on page 100. Page 100. Here are the 5 predicables. They are species, genus, differentia, or what I call specific difference, skip definition, property, and accident. These are the 5 predicables. So let me talk about each one of them. I'm going to start with genus. Genus, what is a predicable? These are ways, these are, actually, I wonder if she defines predicable. Predicables represent the ultimate classification of the relations a predicate may be affirmed to have to a subject. That's not a very helpful definition. This next line is pretty helpful. So as the categories represent the ultimate classification of being as it is, and being as it is known, the classification of predicates in the predicables in logic is analogous to the syntactical analysis of the sentence and grammar. None of this is really helpful. Let me show you what they are, and I think you'll get an idea of what they are, of how to kind of understand them. What is genus? We already talked about genus. Genus is a broad classification of kinds of things. So genus, you're generic. What's the genus that we're in? We're animals. It's being very generic. That's the genus. What is the species? Is a predicate that expresses that which the individual members of a class have in common. So species is a smaller categorization, loosely speaking, categorization of a kind of thing. Species, precisely speaking, is of a natural kind. So a human being, we're assuming that there's something in nature that brings that all human beings have in common, and that's human nature. So humanity, that's the species. Okay, genus is something broader. It can be mammal, it can be animal. Genus can be really broad. It can be a living thing, that can be a kind of genus, or you can have a kind of proximate genus. Animal or mammal, that would be even more proximate. Okay, so genus is kind of flexible. Species is a natural kind of thing. Now, there's debate about what those are or whether there are such things, but that's what species refers to. Okay. The differentia is that part of the essence which belongs only to a given species. We actually use this word till today. Just think of the word difference. What is the difference between human beings and other animals? That's what she's talking about. That's what differentia is. Differentia is the one thing that sets this species apart from every other species in its genus. So what's the difference between human beings and other animals? That's called the specific difference, or the differentia, as she's calling it here. The difference, the thing that makes that species different from others, the specific difference, or differentia. What's our genus? Animal or mammal, that's our genus. What is our species? Human being. Okay. What is the difference? What is it that sets us apart from all the other animals? Traditionally speaking, it's the word rational. So we are the rational animal. That's the definition of human being, rational animal. Look at the next paragraph. Definition. So what is a definition? Definition is constituted by the genus plus the differentia. So how do you, if you want the best possible definition, if you want to define something as well as you possibly can, you take the genus and the specific difference, and that's your definition. What's the genus of human being? Animal. What's the specific difference? Rational. Rational animal is the definition of human being. What kind of thing is this, broadly speaking? And what sets it apart from everything else in that genus? What is a triangle? You start with the genus. A triangle is a geometric figure. That's its genus. What's the difference between a triangle and every other thing in its genus? The specific difference, or the differentia, it's three-sided. So three-sided is the difference. Okay? You can see why that's going to be really important when you're making definitions. However, there's two more predicables. Why do we need two other predicables if that's enough to make a definition? Because you can't always do that. And I'm going to be really honest with you. I do not think I could give the definition of any other animal besides human being in that way. What's the specific difference of a house cat? I don't know. Is there one thing that sets apart house cats from every other animal? I don't know. Now, here's the thing. This is exactly what biologists do, what zoologists do, and they work very hard to make these categorizations really precise and specific. There's vertebrate and invertebrate, and then there's subspecies, and that's their job to do this. What they're doing, amazingly, is exactly what Aristotle and Porphyry and these other philosophers kind of set them out to do. They're really just doing the same kind of classification. However, because it's very hard to find the one difference, the specific difference that defines a species, in place of that, you can use the genus, you can say animal, and instead of the difference, you use a property. Property is not the essence nor part of an essence, but it flows from the essence and is present everywhere that the essence is present. So a property is something that belongs to only that species, but it might not be the defining characteristic, you know? So if we're defining a house cat, we could say it's an animal. That's easy. Again, we can go mammal or wherever you want to pick the genus. Probably the more proximate, the smaller the genus, the better, but whatever. So what's a cat? A cat is an animal. But I don't know the one thing that defines a cat. Well, instead of that, I can do another kind of definition, which she calls distinctive definition. I can take the genus and I can just list a whole bunch of properties. So what is a cat? It's an animal that purrs, okay, and I don't know, can hunt rats. That's not even a property because other things can hunt rats. But, you know, you kind of list the things that only cats can do. You know, you drop them and they land on their feet, whatever. So you make a list of properties because you haven't boiled it down to just one difference. So that's another way to make a definition when you don't have when you haven't figured out the difference. And in fact, I don't know if there's necessarily only exactly one specific difference for every species. I'm not sure. It's very easy to argue for that. Okay. So that's the fourth predicable. So you have species, genus, difference, property. Property is something that belongs only to that species. Finally, you have the word accident. This is not substance and the 9 accidents. This is a different word, a different use of the word accident. An accident is a predicate contingently related to the subject. So this is something that's true to say about that kind of being, but it's also true of other beings. Grass is green, yeah, but there's all kinds of other stuff that's green. Cats, cats hunt mice, but other things hunt mice too. You know what I mean? So hunting mice is an accident of cat. It's not really even a property. A property would be only that species does it. So what's a property of human being? I think we're the only animals, certainly, that write poetry. Is writing poetry the definitive thing that makes us human? No. If somebody doesn't write poetry, it doesn't mean they're not human. But is it something that only human beings can do? Yeah, that's what makes it a property. The fact that we have skin, that's an accident. Other things have skin as well. Is it true of human being? Yeah, it's true, but it's not really a property of human being. It's an accident. So those are the 5 predicables: genus, species, difference, property, and accident. Okay. And now we go back to where we were. page 80. Now we can understand what she said. A logical definition is, what is a logical definition? It is genus and difference. Genus and its specific difference. That's it. That's a logical definition. What is a distinctive definition? Go to page 81. A distinctive definition is a definition by property. The pattern is as follows. Species is genus plus property or properties. So when you don't have the difference, you can say human being is a poetry writing animal, or a human being is an animal that writes poetry and, I don't know, picks its nose and scratches its face and falls in love and watches movies, and you list the properties with the genus, and that is called a distinctive definition. It's not as good as a logical definition, but it'll work for most uses. Other types of definition. What are causal definitions? So again, I don't need to necessarily be able to give a perfect logical definition of something in order to talk about it. There are other ways to define it. So there's logical. Not as good as logical is distinctive definition. Other types of definition, a causal definition, the bottom of 81, is one that makes explicit the meaning or intention of the term by naming the cause which produced the reality, which the term signifies. A causal definition may be any one of the four causes. She's going into philosophy of nature here. I don't know if it's a place here to do that, but I'll just go through real quick. There are four causes. I'm going to do them in a different order. The material cause of a thing is what it's made of. So can I define or at least describe something by saying what it's made of? Sure. What is a human being? A human being is 70% water and something percent carbon, and then whatever other stuff is in the human body. Is that a full definition of what a human being is? No. And I can prove that to you pretty easily. Just take a human being, okay, a living person, and that's a human being, and then you take them and put them in a blender, and then you press liquefy. And after the end of that experiment, you actually have all the same stuff there, but you don't have a human being anymore. So a human being is more than the sum of its parts. That's something to think about. It's not really the class to talk about that, but when you take a philosophy of nature or philosophy of human nature course, you'll hopefully talk about that. However, is it true to say that a human being is all these components? Yes, as long as you don't say the word only. A human being is all these things, but he's not only these things. So that's a causal definition. So that's the material cause is what it's made of. The formal cause is what kind of being it is. So what is my formal cause? It's actually my species. I am human being. That's my formal cause. An efficient cause is what we usually mean by cause. I'm causing this pen to fly now on the floor. That's efficient cause is I'm causing something to happen. The final cause is the purpose. Why? So if I want to sort of, what's the purpose of a human being? Well, you go to like your Baltimore Catechism. Well, a human being was created in order to love and serve God, or something like that, right? So you can understand something according to its purpose. And that will help you understand what the thing is if you know why the thing exists. When you use which one of these, it's not really a time to go into that, and there's not really any rules for that. You do what makes sense. For example, pneumonia is a disease caused by the pneumococcus virus, I guess, I don't know, is the efficient cause. Water is H2O, that's the material cause. Okay, whatever. So those are the four causes. Not really that important, but that's a causal definition. Is a definition according to one of those four causes. What is a descriptive definition? A descriptive definition, on page 82, merely enumerates the characteristics by which the species can be recognized. For example, an elephant is a huge, thick-set, nearly hairless mammoth. You're just describing the thing. What else? A nominal definition, I'm skipping some of these. A nominal definition, second half of 82, is when you're defining the word, not the thing. What is it to define? There is actually, she gives 3 different versions of a nominal definition. There's definition by etymology. You see the number 1 on page 82. This is fun. This is when you look at the root of the word in other languages. Where did this word come from? Infinite is derived from Latin in, which means not, plus finitus means limited. That's neat. I gave the word human, I think last class. Human comes from the Latin word humanus, which is related to the word humus, which means dirt or soil or earth. So so what are you defining there? You're not defining what a human being is. You're looking at the roots of the word. Can that help you understand sometimes what the thing is by knowing what the word is? Yeah, it'll help you sort of see how that culture viewed that thing, you know? So that's the definition by etymology, which is a nominal definition. Another nominal definition is definition by synonyms. This is what you'll find in a dictionary. And I'm going to make a request right now. Now that you're in college, you are no longer allowed to start a paper with Webster's dictionary defines blah, blah, blah as blah, blah, blah. From this point on, nobody cares what Webster's defines anything as. Webster's just takes synonyms to define a word, and you don't do that in philosophy. The way you define a word in philosophy is what I just talked to you about. You find the genus and the specific difference. That's what you're doing. However, if you just don't know what the word means, dictionaries are great. They're just not very useful for philosophy papers. Okay. I have a funny story about my dad. Was a physics teacher in Iraq, and so he had he was doing a lab, and the lab manual that he happened to have was from America, and so he opens the lab manual and it says mix 1 gallon of water, and he's like, what's a gallon? He doesn't know what a gallon is, because they use metric system in Iraq, and so he's like, well, better look up. He goes and looks it up in the dictionary, and it says a gallon is a volumetric unit of measure equivalent to 4 quarts. So he says, okay, we're making progress. What is a quart? I don't know what a quart is either, but I do know a gallon is 4 of them. So he goes and looks up quart, and he says, okay, what's a quart? A quart is a volumetric unit of measurement equivalent to 1/4 of a gallon. You see the joke there? It's just a circular definition. And when you use synonyms to define words, you're just going in circles. That's what dictionaries do, and they're useful for what they are, but they're not useful in philosophy. But again, you're defining the word. That's a definition by synonym, another nominal definition. And finally, an arbitrary definition is just like just for the sake of argument, I'm just going to define a human as a featherless biped. It's a thing that walks on 2 legs and doesn't have any feathers. Just for the sake of argument, I just need to move on with what I'm trying to say here. I can't go look it up in a dictionary, and I can't define the species right now. I don't need to. Let's just be arbitrary right now. Okay, you're defining a word. Okay. That's it. I'm going kind of long today. Let's see. No, one more. What are the 5 attributes of a good definition? Here we go. This is pretty helpful, I think. Page 84. A definition should be 1. Convertible with the subject, the species, the term to be defined. A man is a rational animal. A rational animal is a man. You should be able to place the definition wherever that word is, and it would mean the same thing. That's one good way to think about whether you've got a good definition. 2, it should be positive rather than negative. Okay? So you want to define things according to positive terms. You don't want to define them negatively. A good man is one who does not harm his fellow man. That's not very helpful. Like a guy that's just been in a coma his entire life. I mean, they're not bad, but I wouldn't call that a good man. You need a little bit more content to define a good man. So convertible with the subject, positive. This one is extremely important. Clear. Your terms should be so clear. If you speak vaguely, you are not going to have anybody understand you. Anyway, just try to have clear definitions. Number 4, free from a word derived from the same root. Yeah, you should not use a word to define itself or a word related to that word. You got to find something else to do. Free from a word derived from the same root. And number 5, symbolized by a parallel, not mixed grammatical structure. For example, a gerund should be used to define a gerund, an infinitive to define an infinitive. So pessimism is when a person looks on the dark side of everything. No. You don't want to define pessimism as when a person. I want to define an adjective using adjectives. Okay? I want to define a noun using nouns. I think that's a very good rule to follow. Okay? Okay, just past an hour. Is there anything else I want to say? I guess that's fine. We got through this first act of the intellect, terms. Next class, we're going to talk about joining terms and propositions. I have a feeling next class is going to be a lot shorter. There's not as much to say about propositions as there is with terms. Although for next week you're going to be reading some Plato, so you're going to be reading Plato's Meno, and so it might take a little bit more of our time. Okay, see you next time.